Hey Team Bio, welcome to your screencast, Introduction to Cellulose Digestion. So in our first screencast on the Big Four, Part 1, Introduction to Carbohydrates, you learned about 3 different types of polysaccharides of glucose. So glucose is a monosaccharide. Let's say glucose. It's an example of a monosaccharide. I think there's a CC. Yeah. Or a single sugar. And when we put a bunch of glucose monomers or monosaccharides together, we can form polysaccharides. So when you add them all together, you get polysaccharides. And the examples that we talked about in class were starch, or I guess in your screencast, were starch, which is how plants store glucose energy as starch. And then we talked about glycogen. This is how animals store glucose energy. And then we talked about cellulose, which is one of the primary components of the plant cell wall. So it's actually not an energy storage molecule, but instead it's a structural feature of holding plant cell walls nice and rigid, helping keep plant cells solid and stiff and upright. And it's actually the most abundant polysaccharide on Earth. What does it look like? Well, here is a single glucose monomer right here. And it is joined covalent through a covalent bond to a glucose monomer right next to it. But you can, so they're covalently linked in all here and here and here and here and here. But you can also see if we examine like this glucose monomer, for example, all these slightly grainy, but you can still see dotted lines that I'm going to highlight here. These represent hydrogen bonds that hold these long strings of glucose in line with strings next to them. So it forms kind of like a chainmail type pattern, or I guess you could call it kind of a mesh grid. And it's really strong. All of these covalent bonds that hold the chains to one another, as well as the sum of all the hydrogen bonds, make it a really good, solid, rigid material to build strong cell walls with. So we said it's the most abundant polysaccharide on Earth. So it means that there's tons of glucose all held together in this form, which could be a fantastic energy source, except that for the fact that animals can't digest cellulose. They can't break these bonds between the glucose monomers. So animals. I should say bond, the bond. So animals can't break the bond that holds these glucose monomers together, and as a result, they can't digest cellulose. The reason why they can't break the bond is because they don't have the enzymes that break the bond apart. However, you've probably noticed there are a lot of animals that eat primarily plants, and they seem to do just fine. And there's a reason for that. The four animals that I have listed down here are all examples of animals that that eat a lot of cellulose, and they actually do so, or they're able to digest it in a very interesting and all of them different way. So your goal for tonight, go back to Schoology, and you're going to find four links, 3 things to read and 1 video that explain the unique way each of these animals forms very interesting relationships with other organisms and uses them to break down cellulose and extract the energy that is stored within this molecule that would otherwise be unavailable to them. So you're going to look for mutualistic relationships between these organisms and the things inside them that are helping them break down cellulose into glucose monomers and therefore extracting the energy from it. Okay, good luck.